Don't work in companies. Just go start your own thing.
If people don't need your service or don't believe in you, that's the end of your business. Everyone has a mission in life, and it doesn't end till you end.
So you invest in your team so they're good enough to leave. You treat them well so they choose not to.
What was your biggest challenge?
My first car was
To spin it round about 20 times before it...
Muriya Unplugged. Let's go. Guys, what was your first car that you ever owned? What do you drive now? And did you think that you're going to get to the car that you're driving now? Whatever.
Actually, I'm very happy to jump in first. I have a whole philosophy around this, which I'm not going to bore you with. But I'll tell you, my first car was a Fiat 128. It's called in Arabic, so 128. It was a 10,000 pound, $3,000 car total. My next car was a downgrade to a Honda Civic. That's when I was working, actually, and it didn't have AC in New York because I couldn't afford it. My third car was a Honda Accord, so that was a slight upgrade, but it was used much more than the other one. It did have AC because I was in Dubai. And now I drive a Toyota, so it's kind of a half a jump, Toyota Fortuner. But actually, that's it. And my philosophy on this has always been that, you know, there's no point in kind of spoiling yourself too much. Now, where I'm actually half lying is in between. I bought a 911 Turbo S, which I was really having a lot of fun with. But since that's gone, so I've always tried to maintain
That was before the philosophy came in then, yeah?
No, that was before joining ODH, actually.
My first car was also a Fiat, registration A708ANC. This was a car I bought in the UK. For £700, I paid the first £500, didn't have the other £200. I still owe it to a friend of mine who's long forgiven me for it. And in the first week, I think I broke the handbrake. The seat belt broke, so I had to tie the two seat belts together. Anyone joining me, which was really, and I couldn't obviously park at slopes because I had no handbrake, so I had to use the gear. But yeah, and in the end, it went to a scrapyard. It was that bad when I left the UK. I drive a Porsche Taycan now because it's all about ESG and the economy, and caring about
the electric one or the hybrid?
Electric one.
Fully electric.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an embarrassment.
Well, thank you.
You can't have a Porsche or a Ferrari or a Lamborghini that's electric. Is there something wrong with
You know what?
Wrong answer.
Okay, let's retake that. That's a Ferrari. But you can actually add these I don't know what they call them, but like the noisemakers.
Yeah.
But it's an electric noisemaker, so
Yeah.
it goes.
No, man.
So yeah, not a manly car, but there you go.
I had a Ford Fiesta Dash, which was 10 years old when I bought it for £700, but I paid for it. It was an amazing car because after I'd had it for 3 months, I drove onto some black ice and I managed to spin it round about 20 times before I put it into the ditch. Then I crawled out the window, and then it went from being a Ford Fiesta Dash to a Ford Fiesta Bash, and it just had dents in it for the rest of its life, and it to be put out to pasture at the end of 12 months. My happy space is I have a Volkswagen camper van.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
And I spend a lot of time with my dog and my bikes and my wife in the Volkswagen camper van. So that's
I like and my wife.
and my wife. Yeah. Hope she doesn't watch us. And we've actually just come back from 2 weeks touring the very Outer Hebrides, the Atlantic Islands off the coast of Scotland. And it was a beautiful thing because there was no Wi-Fi, so Omar couldn't phone me.
He did manage to send me pictures though, which I think were just incredible.
Basically, you're an engineer. You're into tourism and hospitality as a background. So how did you transition into real estate and tourism?
You're asking the really difficult questions because they're not very politically correct. So actually, I'm extremely into cars and I race a lot. And even with the team here, when we're in Guna, we always go on the go-karting thing, and it gets extremely heated. It got so heated, in fact, that a person who will not be mentioned ended up in a major accident. We had to take her to the hospital with x-rays and things like that. So from a racing perspective, from a car driving perspective, I would say that it's a true love and it's a real thing. Anything mechanical, so you mentioned it, I started as a mechanical engineer, finished as an electrical engineer, but anything that has to do with engines or technology or whatever, I'm really passionate about and do a lot of. But the difficult question that you're posing is how did I end up in real estate and tourism, etc.? And that's a very difficult question because the non-politically correct answer is I didn't actually end up in real estate tourism or anything like this. I ended up in a transformation role, right? So it's yeah, I don't think about it as, you know, we're doing real estate or I'm sort of, I think we are, of course, as a company doing all these things. But actually the only reason I'm here, no, there are many reasons I'm here, but the one that wakes me up every morning is the fact that we're going through a major transformation, which really, frankly, is irrelevant about the sector in which we are. We could be doing it in space technology, or we could be doing it in bricks and mortars, which is what we're doing. But that's what I'm a lot more passionate about.
Actually, yes, I studied engineering not because I wanted to, but traditionally, your parents kind of decide, you know, what makes sense for you. So my dad was like, choose what you want, but choose something where you can get a job. And so it was either engineering or medicine. Didn't really like it. Medicine, liked engineering a bit more, and that's how I started. Spent a fair bit of time in the oil and gas sector, and definitely that convinced me that's not where I belonged. And tourism and real estate really drew me. Yeah, I like what Omar said, which is, again, it happens to be that we build homes and beautiful experiences in our hotels for our guests, but it's the huge potential that we have here that we can unlock, whether it's, you know, creating experiences, memories, or jobs, and, you know, really stimulating the economy in Sifa and Salalah. That's really what gets me out of bed. Whatever the product is, that's fine. We do create an amazing product, but that's really what gets me excited. I think that's what gets the team excited and fired up.
Yeah, I actually started as a trainee and a travel agent. I started as a trainee and a travel agent because my girlfriend at the time's father ran the travel agent and told me I had to get a real job. So he gave me the traineeship, and then I worked for a travel agent, went to Tenerife, tour operator for a while. Then I worked for airline, worked for KLM, the Dutch airline. And then in 2000, when the internet was just blowing up, I moved into working a startup within the internet, and then moved from there into hotels, and then moved into cruise lines, where I was until I joined here. But it's a similar story. I've been travel, tourism, and leisure, sometimes on the business travel side, sometimes on the vacation side, but I've always been involved in change projects.
So what was I thinking moment that you went through? If there's one moment that you can think to yourself, so what was I thinking doing this? What would that be?
Do you know, it's quite easy for me because I was never an engineer, and
so he never thinks.
And travel, tourism, and hospitality is a fun place to hang out and build your career. I have to be honest with that. The other thing that you do get the opportunity to do with travel and tourism and hospitality is that you can you experience different cultures. So I've worked a bit in the UK, but I've worked in the US, I've worked in Europe, spent time in Moscow, spent time in South Africa, and you know, when you actually look at it, and one of the things that really attracted me to Erasmus, to be honest with you, is, you know, if you look at my job, and on Monday I'm dealing with Swiss hotels, Swiss team members, you know, you're dealing with things, and Tuesday you're at Oman, Wednesday you're Egypt. The cultures are so different. And that's an amazing challenge, actually, to understand, you know, how you drive a great work experience for your team members and how you grab an amazing experience for your guests when they arrive. Yeah, and that's part of the challenge that I really enjoy. But I stress it again, people from travel and tourism have far more fun than engineers.
Yeah. Do you guys have any what was I thinking moment, whether career-wise or university or driving?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was when I left the oil and gas sector, which is fantastic. Built me, you know, I built some great experience and skills base there. The first week we flew to Beirut. This was setting up the Al Moj project, and the consultant who became a mentor because I was new to the sector and a good friend now, he said we need to do some research. And research in the oil and gas sector is going to, you know, petrol stations to refineries and, you know, these kind of heavy, bulky, lots of metal plants. And we went to a restaurant and we were chatting and talking, and then we were walking around town, and I asked him, I said, where's the research part? He said, we were doing research, remember, you know, get out of your oil and gas mentality. Tourism is about this. And that was the moment when I felt, thank God I've changed. You know, that was definitely no regrets, but I haven't looked back since.
No, I think the what was I thinking, there are maybe two that I can think of, one fun and one a bit more serious. The more serious one was one of my clients was a telco that had just acquired a whole bunch of African operations. They were a very local GCC-based telecom, and in one shot back in 2004, they acquired a operator in Africa that had 15 operations. And so our task was to actually go and fix all of these operators and grow them and transform them and do all the stuff we're doing right now, but for these guys. And I found myself one time, I can't remember in which African capital, but there was a lot of tension and there was a lot of shooting and there was all sorts of like militias, and literally we were in a car and our car took a bullet, a stray bullet. I don't know how, where it came from. And I think that was a what was I thinking moment. Certainly was what was I thinking moment. The other one was my first skydive. And certainly when you got pushed out of that plane with someone thankfully strapped behind me, you're still thinking to yourself, what was I thinking in the first couple of seconds, but then it's actually quite enjoyable.
Yeah,
so.
excellent. So
I can tell you so I've always done sports all my life, like, you know, a lot of sports, and I've always done a lot of extreme stuff also. The one thing that I really used to hate was swimming, running, and to a lesser extent, gym work. And I now do a lot more of those three things. Maybe it's an age thing, but I actually find a lot more joy in doing them. But I certainly used to hate them, and you know, I'm not sure I really love them yet.
Silence.
silence.
I used to always need stimulation. I always needed something on. I always needed to be with people, talking to people. And now I do enjoy silence. I enjoy being myself, unconnected from the world, and just enjoying the moment.
Just following a theme here, salads.
Salad.
It's all about food, you know.
Salad. Salata.
I didn't like them when I was growing up. Now I actually enjoy them. So.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I think we're boring the 25-year-olds
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
But that's okay, guys. You know, you just have to put up with grandpas like us.
I think they switched off in the first few minutes. They all have Google lenses, they're reviewing stuff, you know.
What's the craziest thing that you've learned from failing at something big? And I'm talking, you know, whether it's career, whether it's personal, preferably career.
I think earlier in my career I was very impatient. I was running everywhere at 1,000 miles an hour. Sometimes you don't take people with you when you do that, so everything you try and do isn't always successful. And I think just with experience, you do learn to slow down. So if it's about failure, I can say the first couple of major change projects that I took on in my career probably didn't quite get the sort of result that I could have got had I actually taken my time to take people on the journey with me. And I think it's something that I've just learned to be more balanced, more patient, take a little bit longer to get there. So that'd be mine.
When I was at grad school, I had two kids with me who were doing a startup at that time. This is good for the 25-year-olds. I had two kids with me who were doing a good startup at that time, but at the same time, it was the same time that like hundreds of people were doing startups. And in one of my classes, we did a startup and we raised money. This was in Silicon Valley, and we raised money and we ran it and all this stuff. Those two kids offered me, colleagues of mine, they were 1 year plus minus my age. When we were in March, about to wrap up school, there was the career fair, etc. And they said, hey, why don't you come and be employee number somewhere at that point 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 of the company. And I'll spare you the whole story, but it was very funny. Where basically very arrogantly I said, no thanks, took the t-shirt and literally threw it in the garbage 2 minutes later. Now those two kids' names were Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
No
right?
way.
Right?
No way.
And so now I got the attention of the 25-year-olds. She's looking like, you know, something's weird's going on.
That's Google. That's Google.
That's Google for you. It's an old company that you don't know, but it's, you know, Snap, but you know, from the old days. And so what I learned from this, and I've had a couple of those, which is really funny. What I learned from this is actually, if you're prepared to see the opportunity, and that comes from experience and luck in many cases, I mean, like 100%. If you're prepared to see the opportunity, then you can actually grab it a lot more quickly. So you have to be conditioned a little bit to grab the opportunity. And I think to your point about, advice to younger people, etc. I think people today, and I say it to my kids, I can see that their desire to be entrepreneurial, the desire to be independent, the desire to do their own thing without following the more traditional path, which I was conditioned to follow.
Actually, that gives me a good cue because I was trying to think of something that won't be too embarrassing to mention. My daughter finished her master's a couple of years ago and she applied for a job here and ended up working for a friend. And on the first day he told her, he said, this company, I offered your dad 10 years ago to invest in it. He didn't understand. I had no clue what digital wallets meant. I probably still don't fully understand it. It's a super app, it's going to do this and this, and he ignored me. And this company is now worth whatever, X and so on. She came back home and she's like, Dad, I could have worked for your company. And I genuinely didn't even make the connection that a good friend of mine who set up this thing has become so successful, is now employing my daughter. So in some ways it's karma, I guess, I don't know, positive or negative. But yeah, I think the serious message there is I don't regret it because I took a different journey. I ended up doing a lot of interesting things, and maybe if I'd gone into that, it would have taken me down a different route. So it's not about destiny. I believe you create your own destiny. But whatever journey you're on, that's what you should make the best of. And it's for a good reason you are where you are.
That's what I tell my kids about the Google story when they complain that we don't have our private island.
I would never tell my kids the Google story.
I know.
No, I say it with a lot of pride. Because actually the funny thing is, fast forward to 2012, and with two colleagues from McKinsey, we were writing a bunch of business plans for fun and because we wanted to go out and do it. And one of the business plans we wrote, fast forward now another 5 years from 2012, was Kareem, right? Which IPO'd which was sold actually to Uber for $3.2 or $3.3 billion. And it's considered to be the most successful startup in the region. And so we wrote the business plan together. The three of us were going to go do it. And at the very last moment, I said, you guys do it, I'll give you the check, right? So it worked out well. Ultimately, very well, but again, it's a question of pattern recognition and appetite for risk and all that.
Well, since we're talking about Google, what's the weirdest thing that you've Googled? I'm not going to put the timeline, so whether at night, during the day. So I'll so what's the weirdest thing that you've ever Googled?
What's the meaning of life? Which, if
that's
you've ever
more
read The
an AI
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Yeah,
the
I was going to
answer's
say,
there.
yes.
What is it? Isn't it 42 or whatever?
43, I think it is.
Something like that.
I'd be careful because Firas may have seen your internet service provider. You've actually been searching, yeah.
I'm thinking.
We call IT now.
It worries me that we have to think so long about this. We should be Googling a lot of weird stuff.
I Google a lot of, not Google, I now do a lot of ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever, things around philosophy, things around science, things around very geeky stuff, but like very deep stuff. But I don't think that's weird. I don't know, maybe, or maybe, we should ask them.
Can we judge?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can give you a ChatGPT one. Can you write me a job description for a chief e-commerce officer in the style of the Beatles singing Love Me Do?
That's
My son, who was coming back from work probably last year, and I was just, every weekend I used to tinker with AI, just trying to understand it, just catch up with things. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just trying to use some of these new tools. And I said, let's get silly. So he said, okay. And this was one of the design packages, not ChatGPT. And actually, you create the queue there, and then you export it. Anyway, and he said, okay, I want a cheetah in ihram in Mecca at sunset.
Oh man.
And I was like, I said, make it as weird as possible because there's no way there's an image like that on the internet that can just pop up. And actually created it for us. And I think that's the point where he kind of, when I say converted, not converted as into Islam because it's all about Mecca and so on, but as in like the power of what this, and this was like 30, 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Of course, it got very silly from there on that evening. But
It's very interesting how different cultures use Google or ChatGPT, or whether it's a professionalism or in the personal. But how do you guys see you're coming from different cultures. How do you see your cultural background influence your professional or career, or even the way you deal with things?
I'm happy to share that because I just told the guys actually 3 days ago at the opening session of our of our sort of team building and building self-awareness, I shared with them the fact that I am French educated with Jesuits, then studied engineering for the better part of 6 years of my life, so very Cartesian, right? And then spent about 20 years of my life in a company that is highly Calvinist in its culture and in the way that it judges or measures or drives performance. So if you put all of this together, it becomes a very complicated sort of, I think, could be pretty tough in some ways in terms of holding very high standards of rigor, hard work ethic, extremely high bar on honesty, integrity, etc., and very high expectations ultimately of myself when I think of something, say something, do something, act in a certain way. I try to hold on myself an extremely high bar, which I think is by now just highly ingrained in me from all these cultural experiences and having lived all of that in 7 or 8 different countries around the world. Really reinforces the level of self-confidence you have in those values, in those systems, despite the culture in which you're actually exposed at any point in time. What the hell was he saying? What was he talking about?
Try beating that one. Yeah.
What was he
I was
talking
born on
about?
Mars. Slightly different, a very different story. I was born in Kuwait. I started my schooling in Bombay, as it was known at the time. We then moved to China in 1980, so this was communist China. We wore mouse suits to school.
Amazing,
we had a
man.
different currency.
That's the coolest.
Came back to Oman, then a year in Malaysia, finished my high school in Somalia just before the Civil War, and then moved to the UK for an engineering degree. So I couldn't speak Arabic till the age of 12 because we'd always been away. Broken Arabic at home.
Still can.
Says the Egyptian.
1-0 for sure.
And then I think I really discovered my roots, and I feel very proud as an Omani today. But having been away and not really connected, it only happened after I started working, going out, and I was the butt of a lot of jokes with my friends, like, can he even eat with his hand? Can he do this? Does he even know how to wear our stuff? And so on. And it generally started at the age of 22 onwards, after I started working. It took a while, and of course it shaped me in some ways in terms of acceptance of cultures, religion, creeds. I don't look at that. That's not a filter that I use at all today, because I've grown up with all of that. And I always wanted my kids to have that. Unfortunately, they traveled, but they didn't have the sort of really diverse and eclectic upbringing that I was fortunate enough to have.
It's very unique.
So I grew up on the west coast of Scotland in a place called Glasgow. And if you go around the United Kingdom and Ireland, you have Glasgow, you have Newcastle, you have Liverpool, you have Cardiff, you have Dublin. They were all port cities.
Who's from Cardiff? Oh, okay.
They were all port cities. They were communities that always welcomed people in. Back to 17th, 18th century, people that they welcomed in. And, I found in my travels that culturally, some cultures naturally give trust. And then you've got to try really hard to lose it if you're going to lose it. And in other cultures, some cultures don't naturally give trust, and you have to try very hard to gain the trust. And I was very fortunate. I grew up in a culture where we naturally saw everyone as our friend, as our neighbour, someone that was there to make us look good, someone that wasn't there to make us look bad. And in actual fact, I found it really good to carry that around. But also when I began to work in other cultures, it allowed me to understand if I'm interacting with someone for the first time, do I have their trust, or is this someone that I have to earn their trust? Because cultures are very different. But so I think I would call that. The other thing is the Scottish accent, whilst no one here can understand a word I'm saying, generally disarms. It generally does disarm. Yeah, it's a great place to put a call centre as long as you don't want to sell anything, because no one will understand you. But they'll have a great phone experience.
I mean,
I think we need like captions every time, Stuart.
No. I'm just nodding.
ChatGPT will run translation along the bottom of the
Yes,
YouTube clip
fair
afterwards. Yeah, that's.
I mean, just to build a little bit more on that. I mean, you guys are all leaders in your industries and the companies. How would you like to be remembered as a leader? And how would you?
I'll go first
Go.
because this is crystal clear for me. It's team.
Team.
It's team. Your legacy is your team. The business will be what the business will be, but your legacy is your team. Richard Branson has a phrase which I love, which is you invest in your team so they're good enough to leave. You treat them well so they choose not to. And I absolutely love that. But, you know, when I think, if someone says to me, what's your proudest moments in your career? I can talk about 12% GOP conversion levels above the market and all that sort of stuff. No, I actually think back to individuals who have now gone on to thrive, to be leaders themselves, or even maybe not just be leaders, but actually just gone on to have a career of substance and a career of happiness. Because in some small way I've been able to influence the path that they've taken and then create the environment where they've been able to be successful. So that's easy one for me.
For me, it's give more than you take. It's a philosophy in life. I like to be remembered as someone who didn't just take resources, but actually created more, whether it's leaders that have gone on to be successful, whether it's buildings that have shaped, whether it's communities, whether it's protecting the environment, whether it's thinking, whether it's voluntary work within my community. It's always feeling how privileged I've been and the fact that I'm privileged enough to even give back. That it's in itself is something that I'm lucky for. So that just shapes it and it makes it very easy. You're not thinking in a transactional way. It's more about give, and if you get back, it's fine. I know I'm shooting myself in the foot because my boss is next to me, and he'll probably in the next compensation discussion say, you want to give more than you take. That's not what we are saying. That's not what we're saying. It's on record now.
Now for me, it's very simple. Also, it's one sentence, and it's leave the place in a better shape than you took it over, right? And that to me is the driving thought across the board, and it encompasses multiple different dimensions. It encompasses how we serve our customers. So the place includes our customers, our clients, the people who ultimately are paying the bills for everything we're doing. Is leave them in a better experience and better quality of service, etc., than the way we started. It's our people, our teams, as Stuart highlighted, across the board, like literally all 10,000 of our colleagues, is leave each of them with more knowledge, with more confidence, with more opportunities, with more development, with more, frankly, love for what they do and the relationships that they've built. And ultimately, leave and support the institution as a whole to continue operating, growing, and accelerating well beyond the acceleration path that it's on during the time that you are there in place. So it's always leave the place in a better shape than it was on the day that you took over.
Can I just pick on something that Omar said, or actually just amplify? I mean, you were talking about customers. Having started in an industry where our customers weren't clear, so I was in an oil and gas discovery or exploration company. You bring the oil out and someone sells it somewhere. So for the first 10 years of my career, I was a client, but I'd never actually handled any customers in a professional sense. And the first week I moved, setting up a new company, and we were having a chat. And someone asked us, he said, who are you serving? I said, I'm serving my board, I'm serving my boss, I'm serving the minister, I'm serving this, and this. And obviously, now that I look back, I realize how naive and dumb of an answer it was. And then you realize if people don't need your service or don't believe in you, that's the end of your business. That's right. And I think that's what drives the passion today. Is, you can try to please upwards or whatever, but that's not what's going to keep the business going. It's actually looking at our hotel guests, or it's looking at our residents, or our buyers, or our future buyers. Those are the people that that we need to serve, please, listen to. I don't know if you guys have a different point of view, or you have something else in your experience.
I agree with you 100%. People buy people, especially in a sales role.
People buy people.
If your sales team are out selling to brokers, they're looking at Amazi, they're looking at the brochures, they're looking at that. But the first connection is, I as an individual have to trust you. I have to understand what you want, and we need to create a connection. So people buy people. So I kind of just back to the answer that I gave first about you know, about team. And it's quite interesting when you go around the hotels. It's interesting when my corporate colleagues visit the hotels. And the first thing I said this week, first thing I say to some of them is, can you do me a favor? Whilst you go and look at the bar, or go and look at the bedrooms, or look at the pool, or look at the beach, go and have a look at the canteen with the team. Or go and have a look at their accommodation. Go and have a look at the boards that they're reading, so they understand what's going on within the company. You know, because if you can understand the environment that our colleagues work in, and then you're making changes to the business, you're more likely to make them in a people-friendly way, not just for our team members, but also for the customers.
Very interesting. I'm going to divert a little bit from that. iPhone or Android?
Android anytime. Hardcore geek, Android.
I don't know if I can talk to you after this. Absolutely.
You can
the
WhatsApp.
the Apple ecosystem in every way.
Oh my God.
When I was looking to join the company, I met Omar in El Guna, and he said, "Have you got any final questions?" And I said, "Do you use MacBooks or do you use Microsoft?" And I said, "And if the answer is Microsoft, I'm not joining."
You know the irony of the whole thing? You know the irony of the whole thing? So actually, you know, when you say Android or iPhone, if you had asked the question about computer systems rather than phones, you would have said, for example, so Apple-based systems, MacBooks or whatever, or Windows / what used to be called IBM, or, and that's what I would choose any time of day and twice on Sunday, Unix-based systems, right? Yeah. Which is a lot more powerful, etc. Yeah. And funny enough, here's the irony also: the MacBooks, etc., have only one mouse on the button, right? The Microsoft ones have 2 buttons on the mouse, right? Now they have track wheels, etc., but they have really 2. In Unix, in the old days, when we were still students, this is early 90s, they had 3 buttons on the mouse, right? And so it's the same analogy, basically. It's the ability to really get much deeper into the technical stuff so that you can effect and control, in a way, not control, but build stuff in there at a lot more granular level of understanding of the operating system than for Microsoft, which is somewhere in between, or than Apple that says, listen, don't worry about anything under the hood here, and just trust me.
Right, anyone behind the cameras,
Yeah, they don't.
if you could take Omar and show him your MacBook and explain to him the concept of gestures on the mouse pad, okay? And the 45 things you can do with that, then that would be interesting.
I'm sure they're all Googling Unix.
And Unix is not spelled as E-N-N-U-Q-E-S, right?
They're Googling 30 years ago because they don't know what that means.
Since we're talking about technology, you're an Android or Unix person. If someone asked you design a new feature in that, what would it be? Just one feature that you say, okay, you know what, I
in
want
the phone or
something
in what?
new. Android or Unix.
Or anything.
Let's talk Android, just on your phone. What
on the phone. What's the feature that I want?
That you definitely would design?
A significantly deeper mind-computer interface or brain-computer interface. Because right now, typing is 80s, speaking into dictation is kind of 2000s. But frankly, both of them are very low throughput as far as I'm concerned. So the bandwidth, the amount of information and gestures and time that I have to spend. So I'd like to have a much better link between my brain and the computer or phone directly, because I think this would go a lot more efficiently and I can do 10 times the things that I otherwise have to do when I'm typing or speaking.
For me, I think it'll be privacy. I'm very suspicious, despite what they say and whatever.
That's long gone.
Yeah, I mean,
that train has left the station
so
long ago.
It's a lost battle, but regaining some control or at least understanding, like how bad is it?
Yeah, very bad. Short answer.
Probably, definitely. We are the product now. We are, we're the data, we're the product. That's what they're buying and selling.
Right.
Voice activation that understands the Scottish accent.
They don't, by the way, when you do dictation, I mean, jokes aside, do they understand your accent?
Well, if you want to see something funny, go onto YouTube and just put in Scottish elevator 11.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And watch the clip of the 2 Scottish guys trying to use a voice-operated elevator. It's just, it's hilarious. Some are better.
Yeah. Okay.
Some are better than others. No, actually, joking aside, I would love an app on my iPhone that told me what film was being streamed on what service. Because there's so many streaming services now. Is it in
You're lost.
Disney? No. Is it in Netflix? No. Is it in
But
Sky? No.
that's there.
Not in the UK. Not in the UK. It's not.
Ah, okay.
No, no,
fair
no.
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. I want to talk more about the journey how you guys got to where you are. I'm curious, what is the one thing that keeps you motivated? What motivates you? Like you wake up in the morning, you really want to do this again and again and again and again. Well, what's the thing that motivates you?
In my mind, personally, I'm hyper motivated, wanting to do better every day. Do better every day as a collective. And that's what really wakes me up every morning. How do we, as a team, do better every day? And again, in the broadest sense, it can be on the super nuts and bolts of doing something and on a very tiny element, or it can be on the super macro stuff. How can we do better for the businesses that we have or that we run? But I think that constant desire to constantly improve and every day learn and do something different better as an individual and as a collective, to me, that's really how I function. I'm constantly thinking of how do I do things better? How do we do things better?
It's progress. I think I'm still driven by 5 p.m. Friday night or whenever the week ends, if the week does end, to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I achieve what I set out to achieve this week? And have we made a difference? Yeah. So I think it's progress. I think when you lose that drive, work becomes a hygiene factor. And you coast, and you coast. But the fact that you constantly drive yourself, and through it, drive your teams, to say, we set out to achieve great things, we set out to do this, and can we honestly look at ourselves and say, yeah, we got there? Or if you didn't, what will we do differently next week in order to do them? I think it's progress for me.
I mean, for me, it's something I heard from a mentor many years ago, that everyone has a mission in life, and it doesn't end till you end. There's no such thing as, I've done my bit in life, I can go. It could be different, it can evolve, it might be radically different in different phases of your life. But, great people never just disappear into the sunset. They're always doing something, contributing, thinking, whether it's intellectual, whether it's something physical, whether it's something, monetary or whatever. And that's what I like. Every few years I discover that there's another phase in my life. Just before I turned 50 a few years ago, I took a 6-month sabbatical because I was genuinely at a loss of what do I want to do? The corporate world isn't exciting enough for me. I've achieved a lot of the things that I want, but hopefully I have a few more healthy years ahead of me. And literally, it was 2 days before the deadline I set myself, 6 months, when the penny dropped and I realized this is what I want to do for the next 5 years, and then post that, this is what I want to do. So it's just this constant feeling of there's a quest in life, there's something that I'm supposed to achieve, and I want to continue doing it.
I would have thought targets.
It's progress.
And targets.
Targets are boring, man. Targets are boring, and targets are way over focused on and emphasized, etc. It's just, it's par for the course. Targets are par for the course. It's just hygiene, like you say, to keep us all sort of operating more or less in sync with each other. But I think honestly, there's so much more beyond that actually gets you out of bed. Because frankly, if you're operating with targets, I think you lose that passion, that desire, that what am I doing that's much bigger than, really, it feels that way.
However, it is amazing that you work for a real estate company and it's targets. That's a good thing.
That was the
But I agree. I mean, the analogy in my mind is it's as if you're driving just looking at the dashboard. You're missing the road.
That's right.
You need to enjoy the journey. You need to look around, smell the roses or whatever, or be careful of a slowdown in front of you. And it's just a reminder of what you need to do. But you can't just keep looking. You don't go home and say, I did so many kilometers and this was my fuel efficiency. I mean, what sort of I hope you guys don't have these sort of discussions over the dinner table. I definitely don't.
No,
it's all about the journey and what you enjoy as opposed to...
Well, since we're talking about journeys, I think a lot of people would love to know, like, what was your biggest challenge that you faced in your career? Like something that, but it kind of eventually turned into a turning point in your career. Because a lot of people see the end result, but what they don't see is the journey that the person or the leader goes through.
Let me jump in first. So I was in my mid-20s, I was in sales. I just signed the biggest contract ever for the company I was working at. I won the Salesperson of the Year award. I inherited a new boss and said, take me to meet the customer. And I took him to meet the customer, and he said, can you send me your file before we go so I can see all the file records? I said, don't need them, it's all up here. Got it all. Typical sales guy. I've got it, and I'll wing it when I get in there. Really good at
CRM.
Really good at CRM. On a mobile phones, my friend. And I was the hero salesperson. And my new boss said, "You've got 6 weeks to put files in for all your accounts, or you will be sacked." He taught me that when you're in sales, front and smoke and mirrors and storytelling is the 20%. The substance that sits behind it is the 80%. And I'm so glad it happened to me at that point in my career. And it's quite interesting. I meet salespeople in their 30s who are amazing salespeople. And I always ask them the same question. Show me your backup, show me your CRM, show me all this, and how much time do you spend doing it? Because salespeople do not naturally want to keep notes. They do not naturally want to update the system. They do not naturally want to do the end of week report. And I learned at that time, even if you don't want to do it, you will not be successful unless you get into that. And that was an intervention, and thank God for Brett, who was the guy that did it to me at the time, because it probably made my career, that one intervention.
This is very vivid in my mind. This was 2011, January 2011. I just delivered the Asian Beach Games site. 44 countries were hosted there. We were on a high. The company was very successful. We laid the foundation for the Oman Convention and Exhibition Center. I was a hero, out in the media, really enjoying the limelight, just turned 40. And 3 weeks later, the Arab Spring started, and the whole dynamics, the whole environment changed. The hotels went on strike. Suddenly, I was the villain who hadn't taken care of people. And in some cases, I hadn't, because I just assumed things were happening. And it just changed everything. The country changed, the realism that set in was very different. I had no experience in managing industrial strikes and disputes. It wasn't something that was ever done in Oman. Sitting with people for months, negotiating, understanding their real issue. And I think it shaped me as a leader, because I realized you can't just say, well, I've delegated it. Someone should be doing this, and let me just focus on media and the board and whatever. You really need to understand the moment you lose touch with the coalface, with people who are on the ground, with your community, with your stakeholders, that's the beginning of the end. And it took a lot. It kind of rebuilding my confidence, my ability to really think that could I do this and so on. As a company, as an individual, I was much stronger after that. But that phase of several months of constant attacks and so on was quite taxing. But again, it's one of those things. I'm really happy it happened when it did, because my ego would have been off the charts, and I would have always thought, that I'm God's gift to Oman real estate or Orascom.
In fairness, you've got it back.
Thank you.
You got the mojo. I was an engineer for the first 6 or so years of my life. I was very privileged, frankly, to be working in New York at Bell Labs, at AT&T Bell Labs. And Bell Labs is a place where things like the transistor were invented and things like that. I was working with people who were arguably the smartest scientists and researchers and product developers on a global scale. And I was working on engineering projects, and within that team, we had just actually won what was called the Bell Labs President's Award. We were a team of 8 people. We were designing wireless communication algorithms, and our objective was to basically displace a very large competitor, Qualcomm, from providing us the chips that we make, and we had designed a whole bunch of chips and algorithms on them, etc. And it was an amazing piece of work. We got amazing recognition there. On the back of this, I decided that after 6 years, okay, it was time for me to transition to management. I knew that my roadmap was going to be engineering for a few years, then management, then my own thing, right? Still very much on the same path. Now, it took me a year to get an appointment, ultimately, with the head of product management. And I thought this was a great intersection, because product management is, the intersection of marketing, customer ownership, and engineering / product design. So it was actually, and I considered myself to be a pretty versatile engineer, right? Engineer, sure, but I spoke, 5, 6 languages. I traveled and lived in many countries before, had a pretty broad education and all sorts of other things. And I finally get to meet this guy, and it's literally a 3-minute elevator pitch where I'm trying to convince him that I need to move from engineering to product management. And long story short, he says, no, absolutely no. And I said, but you don't even know anything about me. How can that be? And he says, well, you're an engineer. How can you do product management? And I literally, on the next day, I put in my resignation and I joined McKinsey. And in hindsight, it was the best thing I ever did. And it's the one lesson that I kept away from this in my life was, first of all, versatility and the ability to do anything pretty much is a function of how hard you work and how kind of you can process things and you can be analytical, and how good you can be with individuals and people around you, right? If you have those three, I don't care where you come from, where you started, what you studied, what you've done, we'll give you an opportunity. And the way that this affected me in the following 25 years or so is I've been incredibly open to accepting all sorts of profiles of people to come in, do all kinds of things on my teams. I never really look at what you've done, what your education is. I do, of course, to test on those 3 dimensions, always. But there's no stereotyping of, okay, no, you're an engineer, therefore you don't fit in this role. I mean, you're an engineer and you're leading a big organization. You come from travel and tourism, you're leading a very large organization, and etc. We have people like, some of our colleagues who are with us today who really barely have, a very broad education and nothing else, and they lead very large organizations. So it's really on your merits, on the work ethic you have, on the analytical capability you have, and on your people leadership skills that you have. That to me was the thing.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. One of them is a little bit serious, so but very quickly, if you can go back and give yourself when you were advice when you were 18 years old, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, don't work in companies. Just go start your own thing from the very get-go. I actually wouldn't hesitate to do that now. I was, like I said, I think I was brought up in the 70s and 80s in, as I said, multiple different countries, but fundamentally Egypt, or at least of Egyptian origin. The mindset of my family's generation, my parents' generation, was one where they had gone through revolution, then war, then hardships, and therefore they had to have this sort of corporate security. It's just the environment that shapes you in some ways, and it became kind of the norm. And I wish, you couldn't change it, and I have no issues with that at all. I would have done exactly the same thing. But had I grown up, let's say in California at that time, or anywhere in the US, frankly, between the 45 and the 70s or 80s, there's a no-brainer that you just go out there and you do your own thing. It's just a no-brainer. And having known what I know now in the last 30 years that I've been working, you could do whatever you want to do, and you'll be incredibly successful doing it. So,
for me, it's probably never skip vacations. There's always a reason to stay in the office and do something else, and I'm too indispensable, and this place will crumble if I'm not around, and there's yet another meeting and whatever. And I think over the years I've realized how much it helps to have reflection, space, ability to, as you said earlier, enjoy the silence and just allow all the buzz and the noise to settle down, and for your train of thoughts to actually complete with all the disruption we have today. And that's what I do. I take very short breaks, but it just changes my perspective on things. A lot of those aha moments don't come in the shower anymore. It's actually when I'm driving somewhere.
So
or
not showering much.
It shows.
That's why I'm sitting here. For me, it's. I wish when I was younger I listened more, because when you're eager to get on in your career, you're often the one at the table that's going, waiting for a gap so you can come in and give your viewpoint. And I wish I just learned the skill earlier to just sit back and listen. But there's listening and there's absorbing, actually taking in what's going on and what's being said, so that you can analyse and you can work out the right response or learn from it and then move on. So I just wish when I was younger I'd learned to listen more.
Out of curiosity, are you your child number how much in sequence?
2 of 3.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I would have said exactly that.
2 of
But
3.
this is a man with
this is a man with a middle child.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
I'm going to start with you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Swifties or Arianators?
Oh. I've changed. I think. Sorry, you've got me now. This is the most animated I've been. I fell in love with.
Excited and
exactly.
it's like,
No, I'll tell you why.
dying to
Taylor Swift released 2 albums during lockdown, which I think were 2 of the most amazing albums ever released. And she did a lot with Bon Iver and stuff during that time as well. So that kind of converted me, I'm afraid. So yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Swifties?
There's people over there going, oh, come on, Stuart, you've just let us down, you know. But yeah, I think so.
here come the memes, but who's Taylor Swift?
Who's the second one?
I didn't understand the
part?
question.
Ariana Grande. What's
Ariana Grande.
either the-
I'm nodding, but I have no clue who Ariana Grande is. But I have an answer though. You want to take some time to think?
No, I stopped at Kulthum, so I don't know.
I'll choose one for you. Ariana Grande does the best impersonations that I've ever heard in my life of other musicians. That much it was.
That'd be cool. That's good. So I don't know who Ariana is. I won't even try to pronounce her last name. But and Taylor Swift, I never listened to any of her stuff. But I actually would vote blindly for Taylor Swift in this case for a very, very clear reason in my mind, and I really believe in this reason. Taylor Swift, if you follow the business model, and I know this is really boring and geeky, but if you follow the business model of what she's done, right, of actually taking on the record labels and the agents and all that system that is incredibly, in my view, unfair to the artists and literally leeches on the artists, I hate to say that, and really suck the blood out of them. And it was an equation that was completely broken. She had the courage, she had the foresight, and she did it. I don't know, I know how, I've read about how, to do that and successfully and regain control. I know she's going through ups and downs apparently now, you guys would tell me, but apparently she's kind of back a little bit on that battle, etc. But by and large, broke the business model completely and redesigned it by effectively bypassing all of these people and having an incredible fan base that allowed her ultimately to go back in a very shrewd manner, and get herself out of all these contracts she had and renegotiate a bunch of them going forward. I don't have the exact details, so I may be wrong even in the actual factual statements here. But by and large, that's something that I truly admire. So regardless of whatever other names you would put, I'd say Taylor Swift in that sense. But I have no idea what she looks like or what her music is.
Never add a consultant a Swiftie question. Yeah, you just don't want to do that. Yeah.
Actually, my niece is a 12-year-old, and she's all into this whole Taylor Swift thing, and I think she wants to go to some concert of hers or some tour. And so that's really the closest I got to the emotional side and seeing the impact she has on girls and young ladies, I guess.
Okay, I changed my answer. It's Taylor Swift.
Taylor.
The original answer was Taylor Swift or Eminem.
I would have been totally Eminem.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Everyone expected that there's going to be Eminem. So
Eminem, I could easily go through. Why?
All right, okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you here on the first Muriya Unplugged. So hopefully for a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.